Well, hello everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Really appreciate you being here. Just to introduce ourselves, my name is Jonathan Whiteside. I'm Global EVP of Technology at DEPT.
Hi everyone, I'm Gagan. I think I've met a lot of you. I lead product marketing for Gen Studio for performance marketing and the new modules. And fun fact, this is my 8th summit, so I have a lot of tips for how to navigate Summit if you want to ask me.
Yeah, this is my 3rd, but I still find it very overwhelming, so I might take you up on that. Okay, so over the next 45 minutes or so, and try to be about 45 minutes, we're going to go through 5 things that we've seen that make or break a performance marketing system. And more importantly, what to do about them to make sure it does work. I'm not going to ask you to introduce Adobe. I think that's very, very clear being here. We don't need the Adobe introduction. But I will just give you a very brief introduction on DEPT if people don't know who we are. DEPT is a growth invention company. We're about 4,000 people globally, and we are split equally between marketing and technology services. And what we do is we help the world's most ambitious brands to grow. That's really what we're all about. And we partner very closely with Adobe across digital experiences, commerce, data, AI, and content, which is what we're talking about today. And a lot of the content we create is for performance marketing. And we've got a dedicated team who do that called DEPT Studios. Instead of explaining what DEPT Studios are or who they are, I'm going to play a video because you're going to hear enough of me over the next 45 minutes. So you've got 90 seconds of a video to explain. And hopefully this will play. Unfortunately, it's not playing the sound, but
Imagine the favorite song that you have, which is very peppy.
I should be humming along in some way. What we're showing you here, though, is DEPT Studios is all about creating content at scale across a global audience. We create, for some clients, 55,000 assets a year for both CRM and performance media. It's very, very highly personalized as well and AI-driven, so that we're creating assets which really target exactly what clients need. And I think it says at the end, we try and make sure that content is a growth engine and a driver rather than a constraint on growth. That's what DEPT Studio is all about. The reason I wanted to show you that, though, is just to say we do a lot of content production. We understand what a content system is like for performance marketing, which is why I'm going to share some of the tips and tricks of what we've found. So I think this is a universal truth, what we find with all our clients. Every brand that we work with has unbelievable, talented people operating within their business. Great creatives, smart marketeers, amazing media teams. And for all that smartness, ideas are not a problem within those teams. Also, it's not always about the volume of content that's being created. The brands that are winning aren't necessarily the ones that are creating the most content. Creating content variations and personalized content is important, but it's not always the absolute volume that you've got. We've seen brands that are really maxed up content and it hasn't moved the needle significantly in moving the business results forward. The brands who we see as being successful are those who have figured out how to operate performance marketing as a system. So the usual platform, people, processes, all connected together. Not 3 separate conversations happening independently and kind of hoping for the best and it all makes sense. Really fully connected. And that's really what this talk is about, and to show you what a system like this looks like in practice. And I'm going to hand over to Gagan to talk about Gen Studio Performance Marketing.
Awesome, thank you. This is what I live and breathe and sleep and dream about. So just a quick, hand raise. How many of you are familiar with Gen Studio for performance marketing? Oh yeah, that warms my heart. Thank you so much. Okay, so Gen Studio for performance marketing, we are, by the way, 6 quarters old. We launched this baby in October 2024. We are now a teenager, very well adopted. We got a lot of love from many of you. We are an end-to-end AI workflow application which is actually purpose-built for performance marketing teams. And what that really means is that we enable performance marketers to assemble ads at scale, make them ready for channels, activate them from within the app itself, and then track the insights, track the performance, tag level, creative attributes that are performing or not performing across different channels, and then being able to feed that back into the creative loop. So this is closing on the performance loop, and we do this while being on brand and personalized and making sure it is all compliant as well as works within the ecosystem of tools that you might have.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to talk about the 5 things now. 5 things that aren't theoretical, super practical, and come from experience of doing this quite a lot. So let's get going. First of all, we're going to talk about the fatigue issue. Some stats. It's always good to have some stats. But essentially, the rate of decay in fatigue of ads on things like Meta and Reels is reducing. Within 14 days, 21 days, certainly on Meta, your ad starts to lose significant performance. And it's worse on other platforms as well. Or not worse, less time it takes to decay that performance. That's really the reality. The other thing as well is over the past 12 months, and I spoke here this time last year, and in that time, in general, teams are being asked to create twice as much content as they were last year. Well, 62% of teams are asked to create twice as much content as last year on average. So essentially, demand is going up, and the shelf life of those assets is going down. And it's the gap between, which is where the performance is, or where it dies. So a quick question for everyone. We do a lot of content audits, content supply chain audits, in terms of how does the content supply chain work. We've done it internally for our own teams, but we also do it for a number of different clients. And so I'm hoping someone will shout out, what sort of percentage do you think is spent on work when you're creating a piece of content, performance marketing, and putting it into the channels? How much work do you think, percentage-wise, is non-creative or non-strategic? It could have admin or operational. Any guesses for that number? Anyone?
At least 50, probably more.
50? Well, yeah? So absolutely bang on. It's 70% is what we're finding on average. This is over 3 or 4 clients over the past year doing a significant amount of auditing. And it's what we see time and time again. And it's not just one team it hits. It's every single team is having lots of overhead in terms of the administration, operational overhead to be able to create assets and traffic the ads. So for creatives, it's resizing, reformatting, compliance checks, brand checks. For marketeers, it's configuring the campaigns, chasing the assets, making sure everything's up to date and ready to go. And for media teams, it's setting up the ads on the different channels and the different platforms, rebuilding the audiences, reconciling the analytics, trying to get insights out. So it's absolutely everywhere. What that means, it leaves only 30% of their time actually on things and activities that would drive performance, which is fairly brutal. So even though our teams, our clients have got bags of talent, they're not spending their time actually on the work that takes advantage of their talent. So what we think is creative fatigue, which is mentioned quite a lot by marketing teams. Creative fatigue is actually a supply chain problem, disguised as a creative problem. As we say, there's a huge amount of demand for ads for different variants. We've got the bottlenecks, which we've just talked about in terms of being able to get stuff live. So we need to ensure that our teams are working in a way which is smart. And restructuring teams, so the right people are working on the right things at the right time. So that's creatives making creative assets, master assets, marketers self-serving and being able to create variants themselves, and AI and automation doing the hard work, doing those manual tasks as much as possible. And this isn't a technology change. It's an operating model change which technology enables. And that's really fundamental, and we'll talk about that a bit later. And because this is a change that technology enables, I want to hand over to talk about Gen Studio Performance Marketing.
Yes, and this is one of those challenges that we are here to solve for in terms of these variants. And as we talk about variants, and there are different kinds of variants that we can touch upon, but really the goal here is to make sure that the performance piece, the ownership of the performance, we can really pass on to the people who actually do the work of activation, who are actually managing performance on a day-to-day basis. And one of the key things here is around, actually Jonathan mentioned it really beautifully around creative fatigue. And actually half-life of the content, I know you showed days, half-life of the content on many, many platforms, it's hours, minutes, and for TikTok, it's 10 seconds. So you put the content out there and within seconds it's gone. It's like the half-life of the content is done. And if you have weeks long of process to get the variants out, that's going to be super hard, right? So within the application itself, we have this empowerment and self-serve for the marketers to be able to self-serve not just assembly of the ads, but also do image variants and do these variants in a way that they are brand compliant. So what you're seeing here, if you also do one more click, is that they can easily create, oh, this is working beautifully, and I want the skyline version for Seattle or New York, and being able to actually do these iterative changes much quickly and manage that performance and get that creative out. Similarly, another format that works really well is video. I think we all know that. And one of the things that we are announcing is actually ability to create CTV ads, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, which is actually a really, really up and coming channel. And being able to actually use the reference images to generate video out of it. So what this is all to say that the power of creating variants and refreshing the ads out there in the market should be with the people who are actually doing it. And there is a spectrum of organization where creatives are always going to actually do the review and approval. Nothing goes out without the review and approval. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, second thing, the template trap. And I call it a trap because it often feels like the right answer, even though it's not. The fastest way to make your brand invisible is to make your ad look like everyone else's. Templates can feel like a solution. And when they're used correctly, and they don't constrain creative teams, they're a great way of driving efficiency within your teams to do more with less. But also, sometimes they can be a constraint. And this is perhaps a crass example, but you can see five different brands here, each selling very, very different things, but because they're using a templated-based system, the templates all look very much the same. You can't really tell what each are doing, what they're selling. And there's a lot of templated solutions out there where people use out the box, and certainly our creative teams can almost tell kind of what system is being used based on the templates that ads are being created. And it's a fun game that they play. And no one wants that really. So it says 6 ads, there are 5 ads, 1 template, but I think the very key thing is there's zero distinctiveness between those different ads. And when you optimize purely on production, you sacrifice the thing that actually makes performance marketing perform, which is distinctiveness and being memorable. But speed doesn't need to mean a lack of control. You don't have to have rigid templates or a proprietary editor or a generic brand voice or kind of a lock-in to a particular set of tools. There is a world where your teams can use the tools that they know and that they love, really important. They can have complete templating freedom to do whatever they want with the templates from a creative perspective. use your brand voice, and it's open and extensible because, you know, our teams work in an ecosystem of lots of different tools that need to plug in together. The difference isn't the technology, it's really if the system has been designed around how creative people work. And when you get it right, the numbers are fairly extraordinary. So this is just an example of a template that we've created recently. One crafted template, really properly designed by a creative team, thinking about actually how it's going to be used. That template added to a system which allows marketers to self-serve to create the different variants, upload the different colors, specify the different headlines that they think are going to work, the different CTAs, and then hit go and generate. And creating literally out of a few different variant headlines and CTAs and background colors, over 1,000 different assets very, very quickly, which can be then seeded into the channels and sent from a personalized journey. So that's really the difference between a template trap and a templated system.
Right. And within GenStudio for performance marketing, you have a lot of flexibility, and as Jonathan mentioned, flexibility with governance, because enterprises cannot afford to have anything out which is not on brand. And this, one of the very good examples of this is centralized marketing teams who are giving more power to the localized teams, for example. You have complete flexibility, and this is something relatively new that we did, which is we brought in express templates that are being supported from within GenStudio for performance marketing. That means you have full freedom on the templates and edit them very quickly in express templates, lock down what you want not changed, and where downstream teams you do not want them to give any control over how the logo should move or what is the size of the logo, but leave the parts where you want them to be flexible. Let's say change from this regional picture to that regional picture. And that flexibility with governance is what helps it scale for teams that are much more global, and they need to scale and also democratize some of this, give this power to the marketers itself.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next one, number 3, we're motoring through this now. The feedback gap. Okay, the feedback gap. This is something I see quite regularly internally and with different client teams. Creative and media teams are working on the same campaign, but they're often having very different conversations about the work that they do. And I think this is something, I can see some nods of heads, so people are saying, yeah, I recognize this. The creative teams are thinking about the brand, they're thinking about the story, they're thinking about crafting the actual creative. And media are thinking, obviously, about audiences and spend and performance. And both are right, but often they're not looking at what the other's doing at all, which is a real shame. And what that means is we have a production line. We start with the creative stuff, creating hero concepts and creating the variants and localizing and resizing and brand compliance and using a certain set of tools. And then you have the media teams using a completely different set of tools and thinking about what they're doing. As I was saying, audience and campaign creation and planning and all those different sides of things. The thing is that the insight, the thing it's the furthest away from the creative at the start, the insight should be the thing that tie the two together as closely as possible. And we see time and time again, creative teams aren't understanding kind of the results from the last set of campaigns, what worked, what didn't work. And the media team have got no visibility on kind of what's happening from a creative perspective. And that's a shame. Like if the two are connected, and that's one of the things that will really drive performance. So if there's a kind of a statement I think is worthwhile taking from this talk, it's the feedback loop in itself is actually the product. And everything else is just production, it's just process. And the thing, if I were to invest in something, it's making sure that the insights are connected to the brief as tightly as possible to get that feedback loop as closely as possible.
And this is one of the most exciting things actually that we see in GenStudio for performance marketing, which is that democratization of insights, bringing those insights from everything that's out there in the market. What you're seeing right now is insights across different channels. So depending on how many campaigns you're running across whatever number of channels that you have, you can actually see it all in one go. In one dashboard, whether that's your conversion metrics that are custom that you have defined, we can bring those in, or add tag level information and see which tags are performing more than the other tags. We also have high performing ads versus low performing ads across all of your campaigns that are running. And the key thing that Jonathan mentioned, which is like actually seeing what's working and then being able to take that back into the creative that will go into the next, which is we actually surface, and I think the slide didn't probably show up properly, is the ad tag performance level, which is, hey, what are the tags that are performing? Or a woman or somebody with a background of forest versus the background of mountains. So we do AI level attributes of a creative to see which attributes resonate well, which attributes do not resonate well. And this is gold mine of data that can then feed back into the creative so that they can actually they can create high performing content for the next iteration.
Thank you very much. Okay, the second to last one, penultimate, the zombie pilots. I think everyone's seen this stat. It was from an MIT study last year on AI, that 95% of enterprise AI pilots just fail to achieve any scale. The technology works. The demo was great. The pilot was promising. Everyone thought, okay, it's really excited. This is going to fundamentally change how my team works and whatnot. But then when it actually hits for the organization and the day-to-day, it dies. And that's because although the technology is adapting, the model and the operations to run the technology is not. It doesn't change. And we're trying to do new things in the old way. And we see very similar 4 blockers every single time. We see, number one, resistance from people. Is this new technology going to replace me? There's a lot of resistance and change. Change management is one of the biggest things that you need to do when implementing a system, especially something like performance marketing. When people think, oh, you might be taking away some of my responsibilities. You're not. And actually, when we implement with clients, if I go to the team of creatives who are a little bit concerned about the system we're going to be implementing, I'd just say, hey, can you all put your hands up if you enjoy resizing assets? And people put their hand down. It's like, okay, who likes copying and pasting from a spreadsheet all the translations into the placeholders and the assets? Again, no one puts their hands up. And it's like, that's what we're trying to solve. We're trying to stop that so you can do creative work. So really explaining it's not replacing you, it's just changing the type of work so you can do more of the work that you like is really important. The second one is what I call kind of a sports car stuck in traffic. You buy these new platforms. The potential is absolutely amazing. They're incredibly powerful. But then you put them in old processes. You put them in traffic, and you slow them down. So the AI on the tool is really fast, but everything around it isn't, and therefore it slows down. The third one we just discussed, 3 different tribes. If different teams aren't connected and working towards the same KPIs and the same goals, then everything diverges and everyone runs off in different directions and nothing gets done. And then the last one is actually quite fundamental, and sometimes it's not answered. Who is running this new system? Who's responsible for it? Who's making sure that things are being dealt with and the system is evolving over time? Someone has to own it. And that's sometimes unclear, especially when a tool like Gen Studio Performance Marketing is getting multiple disciplines to work in the same place at the same time. So I guess the big takeaway on this, if you automate a broken process, you just break more things faster. And so it's very, very important to go back and make sure the process is as optimized and suitable for the tool and what you're trying to do as possible. So what can you actually do? The platform's powerful. If the model's right around it, the operational model, then it becomes really quite unstoppable. Again, 4 things that we tend to look at. Number 1 is just reshaping the team. The task that you did yesterday might not be the task that you do tomorrow. So actually understanding in the new world, what should people be doing, who's responsible for what. something boring like creating a RACI, who's accountable, who's responsible, who's consulted, who's informed, is actually a clear, quite an easy and quick way of making sure responsibilities are very, very clear. Reskilling. Sometimes this isn't really thought about. These are new tools. People need to learn how to use them. They need to be trained. Training is incredibly important to make sure that the tools are utilized effectively. Streamlining. So stop making humans do what the software does. Really look at the end-to-end process and critically look at every single task and say, could we just offload that to software? And then scalability. Once all that's in place, how do you scale it even faster? How do you implement AI? How do you make sure that the platform, the people, and the processes are working together? Okay, those are zombie pilots. Zombie pilots who are taking a huge amount of energy and not providing a huge amount of value and aren't particularly smart. The last thing, the flywheel, bringing this all together. How does it all work? Okay, a production line gets tired over time. A flywheel gets smarter on every cycle that it operates. And so before we had a diagram of an end-to-end process. And I think the thing that I said is the most important bit, tying the end, the insight, back to the beginning of the next thing, the brief. If that isn't done, you don't get the flywheel. And so when you do connect these different things, this is the sort of effect that you get. You go through concepts and creating the variants and publishing to the platforms and the channels. You get the insights, and then those insights, such as a red button performs better than the blue button. The stats that you see in Gen Studio Performance Marketing then goes into the next brief so you don't make the same mistake again. This isn't theory. This is what we run for clients, a number of different clients. Different clients call it different things. They call it a flywheel. They call it a content machine. They call it the performance system. The difference between week 1 and week 8 when we're running these systems is absolutely crazy. Automation isn't just a performance strategy. Automation is a performance strategy. It's just not it's not only an efficiency play. As soon as you start talking about automation within an organization, the first thing people think about is efficiency. And I always try and reframe that. Okay, yeah, the efficiency will happen if you implement it properly, but it's actually the performance you're looking to improve. So how can we use the automation as much as possible to increase performance? So it's things like, in week 1, seeing what the content analytics identifies. So as I say, a red button or certain warm imagery works better than not. Week 2, actually taking that insight into the next build of the new hero assets and having Firefly, for example, create different local variants. Then week 3, seeing the results. And that's really as quick that's as quick as it can go. It can go quicker in days, but sometimes you also have to let the ads run to see actually, is there any statistical significance to some of the results that are coming through? And over time, and again, we've seen this with a number of clients, the gap becomes quite unmatchable. And let it run 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and you can really see the performance increase significantly. Okay, those are the 5 things, the 5 practical things. We have number 1, the fatigue issue. Your supply chain, not your creative team, is the bottleneck. Number 2, the template trap. Speed without distinctiveness just makes you invisible fast. The feedback gap. If the loop isn't closed, you're just guessing what works and what doesn't work. The zombie pilots. The tech works, the model around it doesn't. And the flywheel. Stop running a production line and start building a system that keeps on learning from every single iteration that you're running. So how do you make this work? So we've talked a lot about the technology. We've seen Gen Studio Performance Marketing and some of the amazing features that it has. And we talked about the benefits and the absolute need to have the operations, to mold the operations about what you want to do. You can't buy your way out of the broken feedback loop. You have to implement things in the right way. And the only way you can do it is having the technology and the operating model work seamlessly together. It takes both to work. And that's why one of the things we have been launching, DEPT and Adobe this week, is DEPT have created an accelerator for Gen Studio performance marketing to make sure that brands who are buying the product also have the operational rigor and the operational processes to run it and maximize the value out of it. And really, that's what we've been talking about for the past 45 minutes, that flywheel, the operating model, the feedback loop, the way the team works. How our accelerator works is 3 phases. Phase 1 is DEPT operates the operations. It sets everything up, and it's over the first 1, 2, 3 months, however long a brand wants, we'll operate it. We'll train the team. We'll make sure that it's set up in the most effective and best practice way. The second phase is then in a hybrid, bringing the brand's team on board, making sure that they can start operating it as well, with DEPT providing coaching and guidance and making sure that it's still running as optimally as possible. And then phase 3, DEPT step out and the brand own it and run it and make sure it's working properly. So the model is that we start to run campaigns from week 1. We don't have to do a 3-month implementation phase. We get going because we've got the playbook, we've got the people, we've got the skills, all the things that you need to make sure it's effective. And that's the reason it works. It's making sure that we have the operating model to make sure the software is working as much as possible. So the platform exists. We've seen it, Gen Studio Performance Marketing, amazing piece of technology, amazing results you can get from it. The operating model exists, the accelerator. I guess the key question is, how fast do you want to move? And I'm going to open it up to questions.
Yay.
Hello. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll be around at the DEPT stand for the rest of the day, so please come over if you want to ask questions. Those are QR codes for our LinkedIn profiles. If you want to link in, just take a photo. But thank you very, very much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.